business licensing. At this time, would all panelists, please turn on their video. Thank you. To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. We are ready to begin.
Council, are we good?
We are good to go, sir.
Okay. Redeps. Good morning. My name is Andrew Cohen, and I am the chair of the Committee on Consumer Affairs and Business Licensing. Thank you for joining us in this remote hearing today. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we have been joined by our colleagues, Councilman Peter Koo, Margaret Chin, Brad Lander, Antonio Reynoso, and Keith Powers. The COVID pandemic has been lethal to thousands of New Yorkers, and we are mourning our losses. However, we must mourn while we are trying to revive our economy from the devastating impact the disease has had. Our city's restaurants and small businesses are struggling, facing unprecedented challenges, and the City Council wants to help. As we know, since the governor issued the executive order, which effectively put the city on lockdown, most of our restaurants and food establishments have found it almost impossible to make a living, keep their staffs employed, and pay their bills. According to the mayor's office, restaurant revenue is down nearly 90% since the start of the COVID lockdown. The industry has also seen widespread job losses, with as many as 80% of restaurant workers losing their jobs. We've heard about half of all restaurants have been able to move their operations online to provide takeout services. However, third-party delivery apps often take a large chunk of the already slim profit margins. That's why last month the City Council enacted a cap on the fees and commissions that marketing and delivery app services can charge, and we placed new regulations on how they may charge for calls made through their platform. Last month, the Council also enacted My Bill Intro 1916, which requires the Department of Consumer Affairs to waive and refund consent fees related to Sidewalk Cafe licenses for the duration of the COVID-19 emergency. Sidewalk cafes cost restaurant owners thousands of dollars in city fees annually, and it simply does not make sense for the city to collect these fees when restaurants are one of the hardest hit industries. Building on these various measures to help restaurants and food industry during this trying time, today we are holding a hearing on introduction number 1957, sponsored by Councilmember Reynoso, which seeks to create new outdoor spaces for dining so that restaurants can serve customers while continuing to follow proper social distancing protocols. The bill also requires the Department of Transportation to identify additional open spaces for food vendors. The warmer weather, coupled with last month's joint announcement between the New York City Council and the mayor to open more streets for pedestrians, represents an opportunity to establish measures for outdoor dining. The alfresco experience is common in most parts of Europe, and it simply makes sense now, during the pandemic, to ensure that people can dine while maintaining adequate space between other patrons. Similar measures have been adopted here in the United States, with Cincinnati, for example, closing streets to create outdoor dining space for restaurants. Tampa, Florida, parts of California, and Atlanta have also adopted similar approaches. Indeed, yesterday, the governor announced that regions that have met the metrics for phase 2 of New York's reopening may begin to allow businesses to provide services outdoor in compliance with social distancing guidelines. Phase 2 for New York City is about 2 weeks away, and we must ensure we're prepared for a well-managed and safe reopening. Takeout and delivery service profits simply cannot sustain a restaurant. So it is incumbent upon us to find other ways to help restaurants stay afloat. This bill would require the DOT identify locations where it makes sense to lift prohibitions on food vendors, providing them additional locations. Food vendors have been especially hard hit since many of them are not able to access federal, state, or local grants and loans. Given the substantially reduced vehicular traffic and foot traffic in the city, it makes sense to look for new areas for vending. Community buy-in will be a key to the success, and these measures would be taken in consultation with community boards, industry representatives, bids to identify open spaces such as sidewalks, streets, and plazas where outdoor dining and food vending would be appropriate. The Department of Health would establish a set of guidelines to ensure proper social distancing and cleaning protocols are maintained. This process would give restaurants and food vendors a much-needed economic lifeline during the COVID crisis. It may not be enough to save every restaurant, but this bill, along with other legislation we have passed and others we are considering in the council, will help support the industry. We look forward to hearing your feedback today so that we can ensure that we enact these measures in the most efficient and effective way, striking the right balance between industry and community needs. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Reynoso to speak more about the bill, I'd like to thank the council staff who helped make this virtual hearing possible. There are a lot of people in the background running these hearings, and I would especially like to thank Balkis Murg, Senior Counsel to the committee, Leah Serbazik, Policy Analyst, Sebastian Bacci, Senior Finance Analyst, as well as my Ledge Director, Patty and Trader, and my Chief of Staff, Ariana Collado, for their hard work in making this hearing happen. I'll now turn it over to Councilman Reynoso for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Appreciate you taking the time to have this meeting and appreciate all your support now and always. The past 3 months have been the most difficult period our city has faced in many of our lifetimes. We continue to battle a major pandemic, our economy is in a free fall, and our communities continue to be impacted by racist policing practices. All three of these crises have fallen heaviest on communities of color, revealing inequities that many of us have been ringing the alarm about for years. There are numerous actions our city must take in short order to deliver justice, stabilize the health of our residents, and rebuild our economy. Helping our small businesses must be one of those steps. New York is home to thousands of restaurants that reflect the diversity that makes our city special. They enliven our streets, share our unique cultures, serve as community gathering spaces, and provide economic opportunity to workers and owners. But our restaurants have suffered deeply under this lockdown. And even when it is safe to begin reopening our city, many restaurants will not be able to comply with social distancing guidelines in our often small spaces. So today we are looking to reimagine our streets, providing relief to businesses and a safe way for workers to return to their jobs. This bill is meant to start a conversation. My goal is to cut red tape so that our restaurants can reopen safely and thrive. Our citizens are showing us right now that they know what they need and that communities can work together at a local level to realize solutions without cookie cutter regulations from the city. We have to trust our small businesses to do the right thing. We have to let our residents lead the way toward recovery. I'm open to all ideas and I'm excited to see what New Yorkers come up with. Just want to end by saying a lot of people talk a good game about helping small businesses. The time to show up is now. Again, thank you, Chair Cohen, and I want to just also acknowledge my staff, specifically Asher Freeman, for the work that he's been doing to push this forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. I also want to acknowledge we've been joined by Council Member Kozlowitz. I guess I will now ask the committee council to swear in the first panel.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Stephanie Jones, counsel to the Small Business Committee of the New York City Council. Before we begin testimony, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are called on to testify, when you will be unmuted by the host. I will be calling on panelists to testify. Please listen for your name to be called. I will be periodically announcing who the next panelist will be. The first panelist to give testimony will be Commissioner Trottenberg from the Department of Transportation, followed by Commissioner Doris from the Department of Small Business Services. I will call you when it is your turn to speak. During the hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or a specific panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting council member questions to 5 minutes, which includes the time it takes to answer your questions. Please note that for ease of this virtual hearing, we will not be allowing a second round of question for each panelist outside of the committee chair. All hearing participants should submit written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. We will now call on representatives of the administration to testify. First, Commissioner Trottenberg, followed by Commissioner Doris. For questions, we will be joined by Emily Weidenhoff, Director of Public Space at the Department of Transportation, Rebecca Zach, Assistant Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Community Affairs at the Department of Transportation, Stephen Picker, Executive Director of Food and Beverage Industry Partnership at the Department for Small Business Services, Stephen Atanani, Executive Director for External Affairs for the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, and finally, Corinne Schiff, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Before we begin, I will now administer the oath. I will call on each of you individually for a response. Please raise your right hands. Panelists, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Commissioner Trottenberg.
I do.
Thank you. Commissioner Doris.
I do.
Thank you. Director Weidenhoff.
I do.
Thank you. Assistant Commissioner Zach.
Here.
Thank you. Executive Director Picker.
I do.
Thank you. Executive Director Atanani.
I do.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner Schiff.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Trottenberg, you may begin when ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Cohen, Councilmember Reynoso, and members of the Committee on Consumer Affairs. I'm Holly Trottenberg, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation, and I'm joined by the colleagues you just heard from this morning from DOT, SBS, Department of Health, and DCWP. We are glad to be here on behalf of Mayor Bill de Blasio on the administration's proposed open restaurants plan. Our plan seeks to help our city's hard-hit restaurants by providing open space for temporary socially distanced outdoor dining as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. First, I too want to acknowledge what a wrenching time our city, our state, and our country have faced in recent days, especially in communities of color, which have been disproportionately devastated by the COVID-19 crisis and are now experiencing the sorrow and anger we all share over the murder of George Floyd. There's much we can all do together personally and professionally to confront structural racism, and all of us in city government will work hard to prioritize communities of color as we design and implement programs to help our city recover physically, economically, and spiritually from COVID-19. The mayor has been visiting small business owners in recent days, many with the same grit and determination of the restaurant owners we hope to help in the coming weeks. And he's confidently concluded that even in these difficult times, our beloved city will emerge from this crisis fairer, stronger, and better than before. COVID-19 has changed our lives in our city in ways that were unimaginable only a few months ago. And as we continue to follow the health guidelines on social distancing, public space has become more precious than ever. I'm proud that DOT has responded to the call for additional open space and has, in partnership with our sister agencies and many of you here on the council, opened 45 miles of streets to pedestrians and cyclists. And we'll soon announce our next round of open streets, getting us closer to our goal of 100 miles. And now I'm proud that as we look to the city's reopening, DOT is ready to open our streets and sidewalks to help our beloved restaurant industry recover from the devastating economic impacts of COVID-19. As the U.S. begins to emerge from the pandemic, we're seeing cities across the country look to their sidewalks and streets to support their food and retail sectors. We're discussing best practices with other cities and finding many similar approaches, and that's helped shape the open restaurant plan we're presenting here today. Some cities are designating certain spaces as eligible for businesses to use, while others have a more involved permitting process where each business applies for space and the city provides siting criteria and guidance. Cities are also providing varying levels of support. Some are providing a full curbside platform with buffers to each business. Some are providing barrels and barricades, and others are leaving this type of infrastructure to the establishments themselves. Some examples, thus far, Tampa has opened 8 streets for outdoor dining, and the city itself has built platforms for curbside late dining. Larger cities like San Francisco and Boston, on the other hand, are mostly providing the space and permitting with little else in terms of infrastructure. Down Washington, D.C., restaurants can apply to use expanded sidewalk space, alleys, parking lanes, and travel lanes for seating. As the mayor has announced today, or is currently announcing, DOT, along with our sister agencies, will implement a citywide program to expand outdoor seating options for restaurants and other food establishments to promote open space, enhance social distancing, and help restaurants rebound in these difficult economic times, including the neighborhoods most impacted by COVID-19. Taking a page from our open streets approach, which we thank the council for engaging with us to design, we're again thinking outside the box when it comes to restaurants. But I also want to make it clear that even as we work to help restart our city's economy, the de Blasio administration's top priority still remains public health and continuing to reduce the spread and impact of coronavirus. As such, we will be working closely with Commissioner Cyrus Barbeau and her team as we design, implement, and monitor our open restaurants program, and will be prepared to make adjustments or take a pause if any public health concerns arise. Currently, the Department of Health's motto for restaurants is take out, don't hang out, and we want to be sure that as we transition away from a takeout and delivery only model, that we proceed deliberately and safely. So now let us turn to the size and the scale of the challenge. Here in New York City, approximately 12% or 740 miles of our 6,000 miles of streets have commercial establishments of some kind. And prior to COVID-19, there were over 27,000 restaurants operating throughout the city, not evenly distributed. Approximately 42% of those restaurants are located in Manhattan, 24% in Brooklyn, 22% in Queens, 8% in the Bronx, and less than 4% in Staten Island. The bill before the committee today would require DOT to evaluate a significant number of streets to identify the best options for outdoor dining in each community district, and then require DCWP to process permits from a remarkable number of qualified restaurants at a rapid pace. We're concerned that the result would be a resource-constrained and cumbersome program that only helps a limited number of businesses. Instead, given New York City's size and scale and the urgency of the moment, we propose an outdoor dining program that's fast and straightforward to implement, with a minimum of administrative hurdles, in order to allow as many restaurants as possible to access additional outdoor dining space in time for the warmer weather. For phase 2 of reopening, when outdoor socially distanced dining services allowed, DOT will work with DCWP and DCP to create a simpler, streamlined process for sidewalk eating to allow more establishments to access the program during this emergency, while requiring them to maintain appropriate clear paths for pedestrians and people with disabilities. We hope to dramatically improve the currently complex process for sidewalk cafes and provide more restaurants across the 5 boroughs the opportunity for sidewalk seating. DOHMH and DOT will monitor the success of this program, which we hope will reach a wide variety of neighborhoods, and will be prepared to step in if it creates issues for accessibility or socially distanced use of the sidewalk. But we know sidewalk space alone will not be sufficient for restaurants to make it work, and space is already very limited at many locations. So D&T will also envision our successful Street Seats program to provide additional outdoor dining space. Food service establishments will be allowed to use the curb lane for dine-in service for the street frontage wherever parking is allowed, provided they maintain minimum distances from intersections, bus stops, fire hydrants, and the like. By following simple guidelines and submitting a self-certification, establishments that are interested will be able to set up socially distant, ADA-compliant tables and chairs for their customers in the roadbed, separated from travel lanes by planters or vertical delineators. We hope this equitable, citywide, and scalable approach can provide much-needed, quickly available relief to many of the city's restaurants, including where sidewalk seating will not work. We will also allow restaurants to use expanded seating areas in our new and existing Open Streets program. As part of this initiative, we'll identify new open streets on commercial strips with large numbers of restaurants and focus the hours of some open streets on popular dining times, such as evenings and weekends, while minimizing the effect on much-needed bus and truck routes. For these initiatives, the city will work quickly to be ready for Restart Phase 2 and in partnership with the state to draft emergency executive orders as needed. And finally, we'll continue to consider other public spaces like plazas and parking lots as potential areas for socially distanced dining, and look to work with the council and other partners to further develop these ideas in close coordination with our public health professionals. New York City is one of the great culinary capitals of the world. We boast internationally renowned restaurants serving cuisine from every corner of the globe, and so many beloved neighborhood spots. Our restaurants employ hundreds of thousands of our fellow New Yorkers and support farms and industries here in New York State. We look forward to working closely with the council and the restaurant industry to help this cherished part of our city recover while continuing to maintain our constant focus on health and public safety. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have after hearing from Commissioner Doris.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before I call on Commissioner Doris, I'd like to turn it over to Chair Cohen to acknowledge the council members who have joined us.
Thank you. I think I acknowledged Councilmember Kozlowitz, but just to be safe, I want to acknowledge her again. We've been joined by Kalman Yeager and Justin Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. Next, we'd like to invite Commissioner Doris, please, to testify. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Cohen and members of the Committee on Consumer Affairs and Business Licensing. My name is John L. Doris, and I'm the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. I'm joined today by Stephen Picker, Executive Director of SBS Food and Beverage Industry Partnership, and also like to acknowledge our partners in government, DOT Commissioner Polly Trottenberg, and colleagues from city agencies, including DOHMH and DCWP, who have joined us today to discuss the mayor's proposed open restaurants plan. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented challenges to our city and small business community. On top of our mission to fight the recovery from the pandemic, this week we have been confronted by further challenges and calls for change in the wake of the tragic and unjust death of George Floyd. And while many calls for change have justifiably focused on the criminal justice system, I believe that equity for New Yorkers, especially for Black New Yorkers, requires that we all play a part in elevating Black voices and connecting people of color to the resources they need to succeed, whether through education, transportation, housing, healthcare, or economic opportunity. This work is integral to SBS mission to unlock economic potential for all New Yorkers by connecting New Yorkers to quality jobs, building stronger businesses, and fostering thriving neighborhoods. I also want to acknowledge the loss faced this week by some of our city's small business owners, who are now recovering from not only the financial devastation caused by the pandemic, but also the financial fallout caused by the looting of some bad actors. We have major challenges to overcome, but our city is at its best when we are working collaboratively and listening to one another. The Open Restaurants Plan we are discussing today is a great example of effective collaboration. I am proud to work with the hospitality industry, the council, and our agency partners to provide new outdoor dining opportunities to the restaurants, bars, and other food service establishments that feed New Yorkers and make our city vibrant. New York City is home to around 27,000 restaurants that employ 270,000 New Yorkers. In addition to providing valuable services to their communities, restaurants and their advocates are also important thought partners for SBS, especially as we begin to reopen our economy. The Open Restaurants Plan announced by the mayor is the result of tremendous interest from businesses and community partners across the city. As Commissioner Trottenberg laid out in her testimony, the proposal will enliven our commercial corridors and provide businesses with a much needed opportunity to generate further revenue while social distancing. Our priority is for all interested food service businesses, regardless of where they are located in the 5 boroughs, to have access to outdoor dining opportunities. SBS will be conducting extensive outreach and communicating with our community partners to ensure businesses are aware of these new opportunities as they are implemented. As we launch this brand new initiative, we must keep in mind that every business and commercial corridor around the city has unique challenges. SBS is committed to addressing and elevating these challenges by working closely with community partners. We will also be actively working with DOT and our partner agencies to further grow the city's outdoor dining capabilities through new street closures and other open spaces. In addition to ensuring business owners are aware of outdoor dining opportunities, SBS is focused on providing business owners with the guidance they need to participate. In May, our New York City Food and Beverage Industry Partnership surveyed thousands of food service businesses across the 5 boroughs to understand their challenges and discuss solutions. Through hundreds of responses, SBS found that most businesses are interested in utilizing outdoor space for their businesses. However, they need additional support in understanding the affiliated challenges opportunities, and regulations. To address this concern, we will connect business owners and community partners with clear information and guidelines developed by DOT and DOHMH so that they can utilize outdoor space while keeping themselves, their staff, and their customers safe. As we prepare to enter phase 1 on Monday, SBS is rolling out new resources to help small business owners navigate the recovery and reopening process. These resources include a business restart hotline, which is launching tomorrow. I want to thank our partners and the City Council for their work in advocating for outdoor dining. The administration is committed to exploring these types of innovative solutions so that more small business recover successfully. The administration and my team will continue to gather insights and discuss ideas through the Mayor's Small Business Advisory Council, as well as through the countless conversations with business owners, entrepreneurs, and community-based organizations held by our staff on a daily basis. I look forward to our continued creative collaboration and your support for our small business owners to reopen in the city. Thank you, and I would be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will now turn it over to questions from Chair Cohen. Panelists, all panelists, please stay unmuted at this time if possible during this question and answer period. Thank you. Chair Cohen, please begin.
Thank you very much. First, I do want to thank the administration for producing witnesses at the commissioner level. I appreciate your time, Commissioner Trottenberg and Commissioner Doris. I really think it's a testament to the administration's commitment to trying to support these restaurants and small businesses. I was wondering if Councilmember Reynoso, the bill's prime sponsor, wanted to go first. Antonio?
Hey, Chair, I would like you to go first, and I'll follow up after you.
Okay, no
Thank
problem.
you. Thank you for that, though.
Okay. I will say, I mean, I was thrilled. I got lobbied in my own district regarding sidewalk cafe fees. I had, restaurants that, pay them. You mentioned in your testimony that, that the Bronx has a very small percentage of the city's restaurants. I think you said 8%. But in the process, I learned how many were in my district had the sidewalk cafes. I think the 11th Council District has the largest percentage of sidewalk cafes in the Bronx. So I appreciate that commitment, and I think this is a smart idea. I am concerned about implementation, and I represent a pretty residential area. My commercial districts are pretty small, and what oversight there's going to be in terms of keeping the peace and making sure that people aren't, if I have large crowds outside restaurants at 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm going to get calls. And so I would like to just know how we envision managing that.
I'll take a crack at that, Mr. Chairman. And I want to just, I think, state something that's obvious here. Obviously, we're wanting to get a lot of this sort of up and going in time for phase 2, which is coming in a matter of weeks. So I think, we've heard the plea from the council and from the industry that this not be a cumbersome, complicated, heavy-handed city process. So part of this is very much going to rely on good partnerships with businesses, with bids, and with you, the elected officials. I think we want to work with you to figure out in different areas, what would be appropriate in terms of hours and other things. But this also has to be, the city is not going to be everywhere enforcing everything all the time. I think that's sort of the goal here, is not to be heavy-handed. We will obviously be responding to complaints as we get them, but I think we would really like to strive for a model where enforcement can be a light touch.
I guess, and again, I'm supportive of this effort, but I wonder if it's another situation where we have a one-size-fits-all solution, that this might work better in some parts of the city than others. I mean, where if in Manhattan, where you have 42% of the restaurants, I can see why this would be, meaningful, and there's a culture there that would embrace this. I am very concerned about a lot of other neighborhoods where it's not a big part of the way they do business. There's, you know better than anybody, in the outer boroughs, the tension regarding parking and,
So council member, I think the good news here, and look, there is certainly no one size fits all, but I actually think the model we designed here, I'm hoping it will actually be the most useful in the outer boroughs, where perhaps you have more roadbed and sidewalk space per restaurant. We recognize too, there'll be more sort of residential quality of life issues to work through, but this was particularly with a mind to lower the costs and the complexities and the barriers for outer borough restaurants. No neighborhood has to do this, no restaurant has to do this, but we've heard, for example, perhaps Arthur Avenue and up in the Bronx, they'd rather keep the parking. This isn't a model that interests them. That's fine. This is not a requirement for anybody. It's just an option. Again, not a one size fits all, but you know, what we heard from the council members, a bunch of you have written us and the industry groups have said, sidewalk space and roadbed space are the things the city could give us quickly. And those are the tools we're offering. Obviously, as you've heard from Commissioner Doris, there are a lot of other things the city is going to be doing, working with restaurants as well. But this is sort of the piece that DOT can bring to the table.
Again, I'm really trying not to come across as being critical, because again, I support the effort, but like one of the things I do like about the current sidewalk cafe process is ultimately I have a lot, you know, if I have a bad actor, somebody who's abusing their license, I really have a lot of ability to, well, you know, we can just take it away. And so I'm just concerned about that. And I'll also, and again, I'm sorry to be like a downer on this, but like I'm a little concerned too about, you know, DOT's practice always, you know, like sometimes like it requires some more investment than just a little paint or like a barrier. I'm concerned about keeping people safe on the street, where, you know, if I have 2 lanes going in each direction and then a parking lane, like traffic can go pretty fast there sometimes. You know, and there's no capital infrastructure to protect people dining.
So I think we are going to require that restaurants do something to protect patrons, and I think on very busy streets, it's going to have to be more robust. But I also just, again, to talk about the scope of the challenge, you know, the bill that is before us would have had DOT surveying over 700 miles of streets and the department, you know, DCWP trying to sort through applications from some number of potentially, you know, at least tens of thousands of restaurants. We're not going to be able to do that in 3 weeks. We couldn't come close. So we're trying to find a sweet spot. But obviously, this was a table, sort of an idea we put on the table. Happy with you all to try and refine it as we go along in the coming days.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. We're using the 5-minute clock, everybody, but I really, you know, I know we've had a lot of discussions about trying to give the members time to ask questions. So I'm asking just people to be considerate of our panelists and their colleagues and try to keep their questioning as brief as they can. Council, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll turn it over to Councilmember Reynoso first. Councilmember?
Hi, thank you again. And first, I just want to say, Commissioner, my faith in you is never wavered in the work that you do and how thoughtful you can be when challenged or asked just to step up and do something like this. So I just want to say, our legislation kind of is more onerous than even the policy that you put forth, Commissioner Trottenberg and Commissioner Doris. You know, in a pushback against my liberal, democratic, and over-regulating ways, I'm actually really excited about this. I really am. I think that giving businesses the opportunity to figure this out with very little interference from government, I think is the way to go. I want to kind of make a statement to the businesses out there that you're going to get a lot of leeway here, a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunity. And we hear it all the time. Let businesses thrive. Let businesses do what they want. Businesses know what's best. Well, we're going to do that here. We're going to give you the authority to really try to figure this out and do well by your community, do well by your business. And we're hoping that they take advantage of that in a positive way. And when we talk about New York City exceptionalism, this is what that's about, and we're hoping that the businesses step up in a positive way. I have some technical questions that I would like to ask, and I think we've had some conversations in passing, but sanitation is a big issue for me. I want to make sure that we have a system by which the trash can get picked up and it not interfere with the work that the businesses are doing, but also not become a health concern, and wanted to know if there is going to be some type of plan to make sure that we address the trash issue here in the city of New York.
Yes, I think one thing we'll be doing, Janelle and I and the other agencies represented here, we'll be clearly setting up sort of an interagency working group that will have all the affected agencies, sanitation as well, and PD and FDNY and all the players. And obviously, we want to make sure sanitation is right. I know, Janelle, this is also in your bailiwick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of our solution here is involving our bids and the other commercial organizations who we work with, our chambers of commerce and so forth, to make sure that we are facilitating all the sanitation needs and other needs that our small businesses have. So certainly there's a collaborative effort around all these major points, particularly around sanitation, as you mentioned. So we will definitely be able to work with our bids and our chambers of commerces and other business groups on this particular issue.
Commissioner Torres, I wanted to ask you the equity issue, and I think you made a very powerful opening statement. The equity issue is one of my biggest concerns. I'm concerned about, the NYPD is not going to show up when Peter Luger puts their chairs out in front of their businesses. But the local chimichurri spot, maybe so. And I just want to make sure that the support being given to these businesses is reflective of equity. These bigger businesses, and even if they are mom and pop, but they've been here for a long time and they know how to move through the city's regulations and so forth, might not need as much support as these smaller local mom and pop shops. And I hope that there is a real effort to be in Black and brown communities, really helping these folks to figure this out. This is completely foreign to them. They don't have $5,000, an architect, a lobbyist to move through a sidewalk cafe for them, because their profits are very limited. So other places like Midtown Manhattan have sidewalk cafes all over the place. So there's a process. They understand these processes a little better. I really hope that when we talk about resources, we're focusing them on these communities that this is foreign to them. And I just want to end, because I only got 45 seconds. I want to say I went into this process because I wanted to take space back. I always want to take space back and give it to the residents of the city of New York. And I think this is going to be the beginning of something that is going to start modifying how we look at street space and thinking about what we can do to help small businesses, to help residents, to help young people. And I'm really grateful for it. So thank you again, and I appreciate the time, Chair. And I just want to thank Speaker Corey Johnson, who listens to my crazy ideas, always allows me to say them, and then actually follows through on them. So I wanted to thank him for looking at this and actually taking it into consideration. And I wanted to thank Keith Pop, also has been in the front and leading in this open streets idea. Thank you. And Commissioner Doris, if you could just please.
Absolutely.
The equity issue.
So thank you so much, council members. So, our goal is to provide those opportunities for our restaurant owners, wherever they may be, in whatever borough. It is our focus, right, to make sure that we have the resources where we believe it's needed the most. And so we are committed to that. We want our smaller businesses, our mom and pop businesses in communities of color to really understand the rules, the regulations, and that is what SBS does do every day, and that's what we do best. So we are creating materials for them. We're going to have the ability to do specific outreach to those groups. And so we are committed, as you are, to making sure that they understand all the challenges, but where there's some concern, we are here to address it. So this is going to be a hands-on approach, a white glove service approach for the businesses to make sure that they have what they need. So we're committed to that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I will now call on council members in the order they have used the Zoom raise hand function. If you would like to ask a question, you have not yet used the Zoom raise hand function, please raise it now. Council members, you will be limited to 5 minutes for your question and its answer in total. The Sergeant at Arms will keep a timer, and I will let you know when your time is up. You should begin once I've called on you and the Sergeant has announced that you may begin before delivering your testimony. First, we will hear from Councilmember Powers, followed by Councilmember Lander. Councilmember Powers?
Time starts now.
Oh, thank you. Nice to see everybody, and thanks for the testimony. And I just want to say thank you for the support of this program. Many of us have been asking and calling for it, so I'm glad to see it getting off the ground a bit. Can I just talk more about the vision of it? Like my district here in Midtown is, and in Manhattan is going to be challenging because of traffic flow and there's not, only so much plaza space available, things like that. Can you give us some vision for how this might happen, particularly on an avenue in Manhattan where there might be a number of restaurants and bars? Two is, I might have missed this part, but what is the process by which one will be able to make themselves eligible for this? Three is, I'm just going to throw them. Three is POPs, privately owned public spaces. Are those part of this program? I'll start with those three questions, and I might have one or two follow-ups, but I'll try to be respectful.
I'll take a first crack, and Commissioner Doris will probably have some answers too. I think question number one, as I was just saying to Chairman Cohen, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I think we certainly heard the plea from you and a lot of others to try and make as much outdoor space available as we could. That varies in different parts of the city. There's no question about it. I think we're trying to be as expansive as we can and say where there's room on the sidewalk, you can have the sidewalk in front of your restaurant. Where there's room in the curb bed, as long, again, as it isn't interfering with fire hydrants or bus stops or other things, you can have that space. It's not going to be a perfect solution for every restaurant. We are also, as I said in my testimony, we are looking at other things. We're looking at plazas. We're looking at, this is not so true for Midtown, but other parts of the city, parking lots. Hadn't put POPs on the list, but we can certainly talk to DCP about that. So I think part of this also is, we've put our proposal on the table, but come back to us with other creative things we can pursue. I think we're trying to signal the door is open for everything we can all do together, recognizing there's not a perfect solution for every restaurant, but we'll do our best to find them where we can. I also just want to emphasize one thing Commissioner Doris said. We also really hope too, and I think council members and BIDS and others can play a big role here. There could be whole block solutions where a group of restaurants on a single block come together on a potential design that allocates the space amongst them all. We obviously want to be open to that too.
Got it. Well, you took my next question, which is how does a group of restaurants coordinate? And then bids. So bids can be part of it. And does this have to be approved by the community board? Go to the community board? Is there the approval process?
We were not envisioning that. I think, again, you all are wanting us to help 27,000 restaurants in 3 weeks. That's not going to be, we won't be able to bring these all to the community board. So that's, I think, the trade-off that I'm sure we'll dive into here today. Fast, nimble, serving thousands of restaurants versus how much oversight and process everybody feels comfortable with.
And has the SLA been involved in this conversation when it comes to having to obviously potentially do some changes to liquor licenses to allow for service?
Yes, I mean, we've certainly been talking. I know that the City Hall's been talking to our state partners. We have obviously city's attorneys, law department, and various agencies looking at everything we would need in terms of executive orders and state, requirements. So there's a team hard at work on that as well.
Gotcha. And if I'm a restaurant and I'm not eligible to be able to use the space right in front of my restaurant because I have a bus stop or something right in front of me, is there a solution to that? Or are you saying, bring us one and we'll take a look at it?
Right. I think you'll come to us. We'll take a look at the block, the adjoining areas and see what we can do. But I do want to say, I can't promise this is going to work for all 27,000 restaurants in New York City.
And to be eligible,
if there's any solution that's going to easily work for everybody.
Right. And I both recognize and that the flexibility is needed, but also get concerned that it's going to be so discretionary that it's going to become quite, there's just going to be some very clear winners and losers based on just some of those logistics. But my last question, when it comes to who is the agency that's receiving these, and is it DOT that's doing the?
I think we're envisioning that it'll be DOT, but obviously I think in close coordination with, for the sidewalks with DCWP, and all of this is going to be in close coordination with Department of Health and some of our sister agencies. I just, council member, to go back to the winners and losers question, I think part of why we tried to make this so universal is because I think we felt the city itself, it would be a challenge for us to pick the winners and losers with this many restaurants and this many hundreds of miles of commercial space. So that's why
Time's expired.
we're leaning into something where it's a more universal option for every restaurant.
Yeah, okay, no, I understand that. And I just thank you to the chair. And my last question is, when does this actually start? When is the first time? Sorry, not start. When can one put an application in?
I mean, our goal is to get this up and running for phase 2. But obviously, I think we'll be informed by the discussion today and subsequent discussions with the council about exactly if you're pursuing a legislation or what our collective agreement is on how this program will work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being responsive to many of our concerns. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Lander, followed by Councilmember Koo. Councilmember Lander.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much. I share the enthusiasm of the chair and Councilmember Reynoso. Thank you, and Councilmember Powers. And I just also want to say, Commissioner, I really appreciate the approach that you have taken here. And I think doing something that can stand up quickly and can be available to everyone is smart. So I'm grateful for the approach you are taking. I really like the ideas where we can be more expansive, whole block solutions in partnership with business improvement districts. Maybe there's even some places to bring the pedestrian open streets model and this model together so that you could actually close a whole street and use the closed street. That is not available to everyone, so the curb bed is great, but I'm glad you're going to be open to that. And obviously that's easier where there's a bid, and so I think that is great as a more specialized or boutique model in addition to the broad model that's available. A quick follow-up, I guess, on the SLA question. I mean, bars, I think, need some special consideration here. Normally you just have like one bartender. So if that bartender is inside at the bar, who's outside? And I guess want to know that you are doing some thinking about how this can work well for bars as well as restaurants. And that's going to also involve thinking about enforcement, because I'm very anxious. Everyone looking around the city's got to be very anxious about disparate enforcement right now. And we have to make sure we don't provide a reason for cops to arrest people of color drinking 2 steps from a bar that has one of these. So I just want to know that as you're thinking with the SLA, that includes all of this set of issues.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a crack at that. And I think Deputy Commissioner Schiff from Department of Health has some expertise in this too. We're sensitive to those issues, and I'll say we're still thinking through how it would work with bars, cognizant of all the issues you raised, Council Member. We want to get that right. So again, I think further dialogue with all of you and with the industry. I have just seen in our neighborhood that I think some bars have figured out.
Oh, love it.
The bartender is back there making the drinks, and there's a guy right at the door who gives it to you in a to-go cup. New York businesses are very resourceful.
Absolutely. And look, the people that have figured out how to make a window at the bar and serve out that window, then that person might be able also to keep an eye on the tables out in front. I did notice that the governor made a distinction between sitting and standing, and I hope we'll figure out, like, standing tables seem like a reasonable approach as well. So anyway, I think those are important issues to follow up on. I want this to be able to work for bars too, but I want us to be mindful of public health and public safety and equity in enforcement. So it sounds like you are, and that's all I want to know is that you are mindful of those things as we move forward.
Yeah, but I think it'd be good to hear from Deputy Commissioner Schiff from DOH.
Okay. But I don't want to lose the other questions I have to ask. So, Chair, can I have a little dispensation if they go over? Thank you.
Good morning, Corinne Schiff from the Health Department, and I don't have much to add. Agree with everything you've said. This is on the table, issues that we need to think through.
Great. And I know, Councilmember Reynoso and Chair Cohen and the other relevant chairs would be glad to work with you on this. So you don't need to come back to me on it. I just want to know that and even if you do this faster than we can legislate, great. We want it up quickly, but it sounds like you will be in dialogue with the council member, with the chair, with the speaker's office to help figure out the set of issues together. And you don't need to come back to me on it. I defer to them. I know they care about these things as well. So, my other set of questions, though, do relate to thinking about the workers in these establishments, because I'm thrilled we're opening up the restaurants and our neighborhoods need it and our small business owners need it. But some of these folks are essential workers that we have not been doing right by yet, and I want to make sure we get there. So I guess question one, this will be available for fast food restaurants as well. I assume there are restaurants. They could seek the tables outside a McDonald's or a Chipotle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to remind my colleagues, you know, we know that Chipotle and McDonald's have been bad actors in unfair firings, and we heard from fast food workers who want to be protected from unfair firings. Before we provide open space for free, public space for free to Chipotle and McDonald's, we ought to make sure that we're making sure their workers have adequate protections, or all that cheering we're doing at 7 does not mean that much. And then I guess I also assume restaurants who have open space will be free to continue to do delivery as they've been doing, of course, right?
Yes.
Right.
So then I would just also remind my colleagues that those DoorDash and Instacart delivery workers can't take a paid day off when they're sick. So before we also offer our streets for free to these restaurants, we ought to pass the legislation that makes sure that their delivery workers could take some paid sick time off. I so support this bill. I think it's great for our restaurant, our neighborhoods. I think it's great for our small businesses. But I would just urge that we really have to think about the workers here as well. We have an opportunity to do right by them, but so far we have not done anything to legislate protections for our essential workers. And I really ask my colleagues to think about using this as an opportunity to make sure that we do. Thank you, Chair.
So, Council Member, I do want to just speak to that point. It's good to see you again. I'm Steve from the Executive Director for External Affairs from DCWP. We are, as you know, our New York City's workplace laws are still in effect during this crisis, and we're vigorously enforcing those. And I know that our commissioner and you and our deputy commissioner for Office of Labor Policy and Standards, we have a great relationship with your office. So, you know, as it relates to this program specifically, equity is the big issue. We'll be working with our partners to ensure that that's the case. And of course, in previous hearings and as we spoke to in terms of the workplace rights bills, including paid safe and sick leave for gig workers, that's something that we support as an agency. We're looking forward to working with the council to make that reality. And also, as you know, may offer an excellent opportunity for us to update our paid safe and sick leave law so that it comports with the state's passage of their law. So we're looking forward to working with you, and I'm grateful that you highlighted that today.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And yes, your agency testified positively on paid sick leave for gig workers like those restaurant delivery workers, and also quite positively at an earlier hearing about just cause protections for fast food workers from unfair firing. So it is on the council to pass and send to the administration those bills for implementation. And I know you will be implementing the paid sick leave law as it exists for employees of those restaurants who have them, unlike the delivery workers, and other regulations that apply. So I really appreciate what DCWP is doing. These are two, things that are still holes in our worker protection laws that our attention has been called to in this crisis. And I'm just urging my colleagues to work together to make sure we do what we can to close those holes and work with you. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the extra time.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Ku. Councilmember Ku.
Time starts now.
Hello?
We can hear you, Councilmember.
Okay, so thank you, Commissioner Trottenberg and Commissioner Doris. You two really exemplify the true public service. First, I want to take issue with my colleagues. When they mention about the minorities, they only mention about blacks and browns. They forgot Asians is a big part of minorities in New York City. We occupy 15% of the New York City population. So please, when you mention minorities, always mention blacks, browns, and Asians. We are part of the group too. And among all the restaurant owners, I guess a high percentage of those restaurants are Asian American owned. So we have to, talking about equity, don't forget about Asians. Councilmember Reynoso and other my colleagues in the BLAC We have BLAC caucus, BLA, A means Asian. Thank you. So my question is, for a long time, I spent a lot of time to make sure downtown Flushing, the sidewalks are used primarily for pedestrians because we are a transit hub. We had too many vendors on the streets before. So I wonder when this new rule get into effect, will it affect the legislation you already passed in the city council? Flushing downtown is a restricted vendor area, especially among Roosevelt, among Main Street and some other streets. So I don't want restaurants to put out tables on Main Street, and meanwhile pedestrians have no place to walk. And also, Main Street we have like 22 buses along Main Street, so it will create a lot of pollution. It's not good to eat on the sidewalk. It's very unhealthy. All these ppms, exhaust from the bus, from other cars, from the trucks, so it will interfere your health tremendously. So I hope DOT will take that into consideration, and also Department of Health. The second question I want to ask is, like I said before, sidewalk is mainly for pedestrians, right? So we should never name this sidewalk cafe. We should name it outdoor cafes, because when you do things outdoor, it doesn't have to be on the sidewalk. You can use it space behind. Many restaurants have backyards. They can use the backyard or some other public parcels. So other countries, when they do it, they have an outdoor market, where all the restaurant, all the small catering place, they stay in one place. They either in a big parking lot near a subway station or some outdoor space that people can drive to. So will this legislation later on will move to outdoor market concept? This way, a lot of small business owners, restaurant owners, they can open their restaurants, not restaurant, they can open their markets in outdoor spaces, not necessarily near the restaurants, not necessarily adjacent to the restaurants. So those are my two questions. Thank you.
I'll take a crack at some of it, Council Member, and I think maybe Commissioner Doris will speak about the vending question. Look, I think obviously downtown Flushing, we're going to want to work closely with you and the businesses there. It's a very obviously dense part of the city, and just to be clear, sidewalk cafes are not going to work in places where the sidewalks are completely packed with pedestrians. But I think, as I said in my testimony, we very much want to explore if there are other outdoor places, plazas, parking lots, etc., where we can do more open air type dining, again, very much with an overlay from Department of Public Health. And I think they may be able to speak. I don't have an answer to the question about whether we're going to let restaurants use their backyard. That may be complicated in terms of then having to have a bunch of customers go through the restaurant, but I'll defer to my DOH colleague and Janelle on the venue.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Councilmember, for the question. So we plan to work with our local community partners and really have local corridors, specific, plans and deal with the challenges there. So, we work very closely with like the Flushing Bid and others in that area. And, we're going to be working with them and really look to make sure that we provide a solution that is meaningful. So I think that's our commitment, and we are hoping that we can work with you as well to make sure that how this is implemented, it's good for the community and good for all of the restaurants who want to participate in. The last thing I'd say, part of what we're doing here is you have the ability to opt into the program, and so again, that gives the flexibility of the restaurants to decide if to participate or not. And if we're on a corridor where we have multiple restaurants, they can come together and we can help them do that to figure out a collaborative effort, some sort of space that we can carve out if we need to address the need to have this sort of open restaurant space, but also with the traffic and other kind of challenges that we face, and also generally the area and how the area sort of functions on a daily basis. We want to make sure that we're doing something that is meaningful and not just implementing something that doesn't make sense for a particular area.
So are you guys considering opening some place as like markets or marketplace, outdoor market, outdoor restaurant place, or not restaurant, outdoor eating place, so that small business owners can go there to operate their business and people can go there? Hello?
Yeah, I mean, again, council member, I think we're open to looking into that where we can find appropriate spaces where we think, again, that it's going to be safe in terms of social distancing, but the doors are open to look at those proposals, plazas, parking lots, other spaces we may find around the city.
Yeah, because this is really popular in Asian countries. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next, we'll call on Councilmember Chen to ask questions. Councilmember Chen.
Time starts now.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner. I think, thank you to Councilmember Reynoso for this bill. And, we desperately want to help our small businesses, especially our restaurant who have suffered so much. But I also want to make sure that we also create opportunity for our street vendors who also has suffered through this pandemic and has not been getting any help from the city, from the Department of Small Business Services, because they don't qualify for any of the grant or the loan. And a lot of the small businesses, restaurants in the immigrant community also did not qualify for any of these government benefits. So we have some positive examples in my district. I know that we started the Doyer Street closure for the past couple of summer, and it's been very successful. And also we have the Little Italy Mall over the weekend. So there are examples that we can look at. And also the DOT, thank you for your leadership on doing Share Street, where we did, have restaurants have tables and chair on the street and cars, moving slowly. So there are already models out there. So my question to the two commissioners is that how do we make sure that there are opportunity and maybe increase opportunity for, street vendor who are the small business, and to make sure they don't lose the spot that they have fought for so long, because DOT will have the opportunity to designate space, and hopefully that will be designating new space and create new opportunity and not taking away whatever space that they had before. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Council Member. I want to just say a few things about our SBS general programs. As you know, the majority of our programs for small businesses are free and open to all business types. Doesn't matter if they're vendors or brick and mortar. And our loan and grant programs also was eligible to anyone with an EIN number. Did not require a social security number or anything of the sort, but just the EIN number or business number. And most of our vendors have that. And also, we assist our vendors with accessing, as you know, capital beyond the federal programs. And I think with micro lenders and our CDFIs in our communities, we've been helping and working with them, and also the philanthropic community. But on this specific plan, I think, we plan to have discussions on this topic, particularly around street vendors, as part of our working group, as the commissioner mentioned, that is being formed here to really address those challenges. And I think as we expand the program, as you mentioned, to street facilities where open street facilities, where we can actually, and different cafes that is being brought up on multiple streets through our bids who are bringing it to us now. We can actually help some of those street vendors. So, we're certainly a part of the list of things we're looking at as part of our concern, making sure we're equitably distributing opportunity as a huge part of what SBS does. But this is something we want to talk to you and others, with about a bit more because we understand and see the challenge.
Well, definitely with the community and the community board, with the local engagement, I think that will help make it more successful. I don't want residents to start complaining that, this is happening there, but there are opportunities that we can create, to support our small businesses and to support the street vendors, because we've been fighting very hard to expand permits so that people can be able to make a decent living without, buying a permit in the black market, paying thousands and thousands of dollars. And so that's something that we wanted to push ahead. And we just want to make sure that we create opportunity for everyone, especially from the immigrant community. I mean, like to them, it's like the restaurant, sometimes the space is very small inside anyway. And, with social distancing, they need more space. And if we could create some outdoor space for them, I mean, for example, on East Broadway 4 side, there's an open area where it could be used for people who buy something from the little small space restaurant and to be able to eat outside. So I think really knowing the neighborhood and creating those opportunity and supporting the small businesses and make sure that everything gets in multilingual. And I'm glad to hear the Commissioner Tronberg said earlier to really simplify the process. So it's not like applying for Sidewalk Cafe, forget it. It's just too complicated, too expensive. But if it's a simple process that people can apply and really can participate, I think that will be a great benefit.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to do a quick thing on making sure that whatever we do, guidance we give, it's in many languages. And really community-based approach. That's the SBS model. And so anything we do, we print it in multiple languages. You have it available in multiple languages. So we hear you on that, and we're not going to change in this case, but we're going to probably do more because, we really need to educate the community on this and those small businesses. So thank you so much for that.
But one last thing with SBS, I know that a lot of the mom and pop store throughout the city were vandalized and destroyed. I have a lot of them in my district, and these are not all luxury stores. And I really hope that SBS can work on something together to help these businesses, because not everyone have insurance, or even if they do, it doesn't cover their loss. And it's going to be very difficult for them to be reopened. So I think that the city really needs to step up and help these businesses across the city who were the victim, of all these lootings. And so I hope that SBS can take the lead on that.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So, SBS has our emergency response unit team who currently providing support. Would love to connect with you and those businesses to make sure that they understand where our services are and what we have. But, they do quite a bit of work. If it's connecting businesses to, any kind of emergency financial assistance that are out there that we know about, emergency legal assistance, incident reports, making sure that we help facilitate that for them. If they do have insurance, we help them with their filing their claims. Also, when it comes to security, working with NYPD to make sure that we minimize loss and help them sort of secure their facilities. So, we do have quite a bit of services, even speaking with the state Department of Financial Services around the various regulatory requirements there, and also even with the utilities. So we have a unit that does that work. They're out there doing it now. And so we will connect with you. I want to make sure that we get into the businesses that you are seeing and that need the support. So if it's okay, we'll make sure that we'll connect with you later to get the list of businesses that you're seeing to make sure that we're getting everybody.
Okay, thank you. We've been compiling it, so.
Oh,
Thank you, chairs.
Thank you, council member. I'll now turn it back to Chair Cohen for additional questions or comments.
Thank you again. I guess I just, I'm trying to know like what level of specificity we're at in terms of like, are we going to promulgate some kind of regulations? Can we do that in a timely fashion? I'm just curious how you think any of this is going to work. I mean, maybe a statutory solution is the right solution because it can be done, without a comment period. I don't know if we have any thoughts on how we're going to work this out. Not that I want to negotiate the bill, but I just want to.
I think, as I said, council member, at least on the city side, the attorneys are looking at what kind of, potentially emergency authorities the mayor would need instead of, I think, a long rulemaking process. Again, if our mission is to start helping restaurants in the next few weeks, I think we're trying to minimize the paperwork and complexity. We're looking at a very sort of simple process where they would, we would make sure they check some boxes on what the guidelines are. But again, I think something we can talk to you all more about. We were really focusing on something that was as quick and nimble as we could devise, though.
I understand that. I mean, but ultimately we have to come up with a coherent, workable policy. And I'm just curious, again, if you think that there's, through emergency authority, there's a way to get this up and running, it still has to, be coherent and make sense and workable. And you think that could be done in time for phase 2, if that's 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, or?
That's the goal. Obviously, we're raising a lot of issues here today, and I think we'll want to have further dialogue with you all. You have a bill you're potentially working on, so I think let's discuss further on a mutually agreed to timeline and what we want to see happen.
I understand that. I just want to follow up on a question that Council Member Chin asked, because navigating, and I've had this in my own district, trying to navigate sometimes tensions between restaurants and food vendors or supermarkets and food vendors. It's something to be thoughtful of, to make sure that we don't displace street vendors or that brick and mortar. Like I want to make sure that we're not increasing tension in that as that we're using it to bring down tension. So that we're thoughtful. If a street vendor has a spot, the last thing I want to do, it can't, and then the restaurant wants to try to use the street space. I don't want to have a conflict there that's going to make things. It's just something to keep.
I mean, again, I think SBS is very focused on the vendor question. I don't know that this whole process will be conflict free, but it's not our goal to in any way deliberately harm the vendors in this scenario. We recognize they have their spaces, and we'll try and work with that. But I don't know, Janelle's
yeah, sure.
On the vendor issue.
Yeah, look, I think opening more public spaces, right, will benefit everybody and all the corridor stakeholders. And again, one of what we're going to be doing is working very closely with those communities and the restaurant community to make sure, and our community partners, to make sure that we're doing something that makes sense for that specific community and that specific corridor. So I hear you, and Mr. Chair, and we share that concern. And hopefully we can get together and we can talk about some of the solutions we're thinking about. But certainly that does register with us as we roll this out, and so we will. All of our information will be provided, our resources, our guides, etc. Will be cognizant of this reality. But I think figuring out a more collaborative effort to move forward is essentially what we're looking to do.
Commissioner Doris, I'm just curious, have you had any sleep since you've been on this job? Because you seem to be everywhere, every Zoom I'm on. I guess maybe you can nap between Zooms or something, but you've really been out and about, and I just want you to know that we recognize that and appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Sleep is a luxury right now.
All right, thank you very much. I guess we'll call the next panel again. I really appreciate the response from the administration on the commissioner level for this, and I think it is a testament to a recognition of how important it is. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. We actually have one more council member who's raised their hand. It's Councilmember Yeager. Councilmember Yeager?
Do we let Councilmember Yeager ask questions? That's all right.
Time starts now.
Have we changed that rule?
Not yet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that you're holding this hearing, actually won't have questions. I will have a brief statement, but I just wanted to reflect first on Councilman Ku's comments. I think they're very apropos. And yourself, Mr. Chair, I think you spoke earlier about the one-size-fits-all question. I would prefer, as with many laws that the council writes, that they make a law for Manhattan and then another law for the rest of the boroughs, because most of the boroughs and most of our neighborhoods are nothing like the main Manhattan places, and thankfully in the last couple of days we've actually seen what that means. Before I start, I just also want to say that it's unfortunate that some members of this body have brought their uniform hatred for police to this hearing. I think by now I ought to be used to it, but it still often is shocking to me. Restaurants are failing in New York because even though the curve has long ago been flattened and is practically a Grand Canyon by now, government has failed to act to restore New Yorkers' ability to restart the economy. And that's not just limited to one side of City Hall. We are complicit in that as well. This council has failed to provide a single iota of relief to New York's small businesses. Don't get me wrong, we have issued plenty of press releases. We have passed fake news legislation. We have not provided any real assistance. Not a single penny of tax relief, not a single penny of fine or fee relief, with the exception, the limited exception of Councilman Cohen's bill to allow businesses to recapture the sidewalk fees that they have paid for their destroyed year of business. SBS, either the new commissioner or his predecessor, that's a reflection on the policies of the city, which have made tax relief and fine and fee relief for businesses literally nothing to be concerned, or for us to be concerned with. And at the same time, we sit here today in our virtual chamber almost as a proverbial Nero fiddling while New York is burning, which it is. And we're talking about this bill today while the city is on fire. And I haven't seen yet what we have done or what we are talking about doing to restore the city, to stop the fires, and to finally restore the city, to let restaurants back in business, to let all businesses back in business. The idea that this one-size-fits-all idea of let's take over a sidewalk here and there so a restaurant can come in and open up, that's not the solution to restoring New York. Giving a restaurant the ability to have 2 or 3 tables outside their frontage and in only the places where they can is not the solution to restoring New York. It's just not. And what's good for Midtown Manhattan, perhaps, God willing, that they ever open anything again, is maybe not good for Community Board 11 in the Bronx, or Community Board 11 in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, and Borough Park, in Midwood, and Riverdale, where Councilman Cohen represents, or in many of the other neighborhoods that are represented here at this hearing and that are not represented by the 50 members of this council who all have residential parts of their neighborhood. I think that it's a mistake to take these decisions and put them wholly in the name of bureaucrats at a Manhattan City agency without including the community board. My community boards, I represent 4, have robust reviews of, quick reviews, but robust, of sidewalk cafe applications, including my district managers going out to the applications themselves, to the locations themselves, and looking at the places and determining whether or not this makes sense. And I'm not saying community board should have the final sign-off by any means, commissioners. That ought to be done by the experts, for sure. But to do this without including the community board as a necessary step in the process, I think is a mistake. Residential neighborhoods are for residents, and there are businesses in residential neighborhoods, that's true. But when we talked about, I've heard this thought a number of times, the opt-in question, don't worry about it because some restaurants won't opt in. That's great, but what if the restaurant wants to opt in? What about the 200,000 people who live in our district who aren't that restaurant? And the restaurant wants to opt in and fills out an application and all is good. What about everybody else? So the community boards, which are the closest to ground zero of each neighborhood, which are the closest to the frontages of each restaurant, have to have a role to play. They have to be able to go there and look at it and say yes or no, make the recommendation, say, this restaurant can handle 6 tables, this restaurant can only handle 2 or 3 tables. Councilman Ku's point to these major commercial blocks that have buses running down them, trucks running down them, that Mr. Chair, I'll ask for a few more moments of your time.
No problem.
Thank you, sir. That we have buses, we have trucks, we have deliveries, we have pedestrians. In my neighborhood, we have many, many, many children. I have one of the largest numbers of children of any council district in the city. And they all can't be in school because our government has failed them. So the idea that the sidewalk decision will be made somewhere in Manhattan without any input by the neighborhood, I think is a mistake. And I think Councilman Cruz is 100% right about particularly a street like Main Street is my 13th Avenue, is my Kings Highway. And those streets exist all across the city. I really urge you, Commissioner, I know that you're going to try to look at this holistically. And I say Commissioner, but I'm really talking DOT Commissioner, Commissioner Trottenberg. I know you're going to try to look at this holistically with a view of what one policy can do to encompass the entire city. But in this particular instance, and I know that you don't necessarily, your agency may not have the bandwidth to do those minor drop-down reviews that are necessary community board to community board. But there has to be a way that you can, and I know you know many of the neighborhoods in this city better than most commissioners do, because I know you've been to them more than most commissioners have. And so I think that you have to figure out a way, please, to somehow include a local step before an agency makes a decision within 5 days, as this bill envisions, for the neighborhood to actually opine on it. And with that, Mr. Chair, I really do thank you for allowing me to expand. I don't have any questions. This was just a statement, but some urging included in that. And Commissioner, the time is yours. You can answer if you want to. Don't have to if you don't wish to, but I appreciate very much.
I'm happy to respond, Councilmember Yeager, and I certainly understand where you're coming from. And I think here's the creative tension. This is what we've heard from the industry. We have about 4 or 5 months of warm weather, which is the opportunity for restaurants to get out and do outdoor dining. So, and I think you heard from the chairman of this very committee, phase 2 is coming in a few weeks, and he wants us to get rolling. So the creative tension here is we have 59 community boards, we have some number of 27,000 restaurants and 700 plus miles of commercial strips. I think it's a dialogue between us all. To the extent that there's more local review and sign off, it's going to slow things down, but obviously have more local impact. I think from the administration's point of view, we're signaling we're ready to be very nimble and open. But that may be a model that in the end the council doesn't feel as comfortable with as we are, and I think that's a discussion to have. I will just say I don't think this is going to be a one size fits all, and that on very busy streets where there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, it's unlikely a sidewalk cafe is going to work on a major route with a lot of, so just to be clear, I don't want everyone to think we will have guidelines, and I think there will be, as you point out, Councilmember Yeager, neighborhoods where this will work and neighborhoods where it's not going to be a perfect solution. So look forward to hashing out it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off between, speed, nimbleness, and universality versus, oversight by community boards, council members, et cetera. And we can work with you all to find out what the sweet spot is.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn to public testimony. I'd like to remind everyone that, unlike our typical council hearings, we will be calling individuals one by one to testify. Each panelist will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please begin once the sergeant has started the timer. Council members who have questions for a particular panelist should use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you after the panelist has completed their testimony. For panelists, once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the sergeant at arms will give you the go-ahead to begin upon setting the timer. Please wait for the sergeant to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony. I will now be calling on Alejandra Gorosito to translate these instructions into Spanish for those panelists who have requested translation for today's hearing. Panelists requiring translation of their testimony should pause after every 2 or 3 sentences to provide an opportunity for the translator to translate their testimony into English. Alejandra, you may begin.
Pasaremos ahora a los testimonios públicos. Quiero recordarles que, a diferencia de lo que sucede en las audiencias habituales del Consejo, llamaremos a los participantes de a uno para que testifiquen. Cada panelista tendrá 2 minutos para hablar. Puede comenzar una vez que el sargento ponga en marcha el cronómetro. Los miembros del Consejo que tengan preguntas para un panelista en particular deben usar la función de levantar la mano en Zoom y serán llamados luego de que el panelista termine con su testimonio. Para los panelistas, una vez que se llame su nombre, nosotros activaremos el sonido y el sargento pondrá en marcha el cronómetro y le indicará cuándo puede empezar a dar su testimonio. Por favor, espere a que el sargento anuncie que puede hablar antes de empezar su testimonio. Los panelistas que necesitan que se traduzca el testimonio deben hacer pausas cada 2 o 3 oraciones para que la intérprete pueda traducir al inglés.
Thank you. I would like to now welcome the Honorable Gerald Brewer to testify. After Manhattan Borough President Brewer, I will be calling on Madison Thomas and then Christine Bertay to testify. Borough President Brewer.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much. Should I pause for translation or just do the whole thing? What do you suggest?
I think you should pause after every 2 or 3 sentences so that you can...
I thought it'll be 4 minutes. Is that the idea? I'm just trying to understand timing wise. Okay, I'm ready.
Time starts now.
So I'm Gail Brewer. I'm the Manhattan Borough President, and I'm testifying in favor of the legislation sponsored by Speaker Johnson and Councilmember Reynoso, obviously talking about the supportive expansion of outdoor dining space so that we can help our struggling restaurants and street vendors.
I apologize, Borough President Brewer. We're not going to be translating each testimony after every 2 or 3 sentences.
Okay.
The testimony in its entirety.
Okay, I'll do it 2 minutes quickly. It's okay. I just want to also say to Councilmember Yeager, I understand his concern, but in Manhattan, where I have 12 community boards and many of them in the busier sections, similar to Brooklyn, Bronx, everywhere else, uptown and downtown, most of them, if not all, want the outdoor space because they're concerned about the future of their mom and pops. That's almost universal. I think we know how important this legislation is. We have restaurants that have been in business for 9.5 years. They have only 10% of their business. They have employees that need to come back, and without outdoor, they cannot make it. I'm very happy about the finer details in this legislation, including that the permitting process will be expedited, no permit fees, and the need for social distancing guidelines in advance. I'm encouraged to see food vendors included. I know the drama, and I don't think it's going to go away. But if we have perhaps a new normal in the 5 boroughs, particularly in Manhattan, we can have a better discussion between the restaurants and the vendors. There are so many details to work out, but maybe something like shared seating, like at a food court, and if people need to have their own seating, we need to figure that out. That can be done locally. We also have to think about commercial sanitation pickups in areas where there is outdoor food pop-ups. This is a new continuing challenge and the new normal under COVID. We can learn from other cities. We also could suggest, and we've done this in a letter to DOT, the street seats program, which exists all over the world. And if you can't expand in your area because of space limitations, you can allow dining in the parking lane for those businesses that can't do anything else because there's a bus or truck route, something to consider. We're also concerned about racial justice. That's what we're all focused on with the protesters and those of us in our lives. So we have to make sure that the permit given to the sidewalk cafes are granted equitably and without fees. I know that the state liquor authority guidance under the governor's law recently haven't changed, and we think they'll be better under SLA. I just want to say one more thing, which is the bids, the chambers of commerce, and the community boards can play a big role in making sure that it's a fair share of outdoor dining space. They're the ones who want this. Congratulations, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Borough President Brewer. I see we have a question from Councilmember Yeager. Councilmember Yeager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick to Madam President, I couldn't agree with you more. It's with what you said about Manhattan. Manhattan is so different. I hate to do this when it comes to the city and separate us out as to different entities and different places. But the reality is, and you know this better than anyone who walks this chamber, Manhattan is such a different place. Manhattan has to have its own way about it because of just the nature of what Manhattan is. And I think that there's got to be a way. Maybe Manhattan shouldn't have a community board input. Maybe that's the smartest way. But there's got to be a way that in the smaller neighborhoods, in the outskirts, in the boroughs, and I don't mean to disrespect that Manhattan is also a borough, but you do know what I mean when I say that. I think you're right. I think Manhattan has to have the ability to literally jumpstart the economy, to put its foot on the gas, go 60 miles an hour and make it happen. It's one of the reasons that I've already said that I think that the reopening needs to happen. This phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Some of these small businesses need to get in there right this second, and they need to start it. And that starting really does happen in Manhattan. And I think you know that probably better than I do, for sure, and better than most members of the body.
Thank you. I'm just saying the community boards are already involved, council member, and they have been working on this for months. They will be involved the entire time.
Not in Brooklyn, not in Queens, not in Staten Island. That's my only point. Not in the Bronx. Manhattan is a different place. But thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Borough President Brewer. Next up is Madison Thomas, followed by Christine Berthet, and then Robert Bookman. Madison?
Time starts now.
Hello, my name is Madison Thomas, and I'm representing Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright. Assemblymember Seawright has submitted written testimony, which I will be reading. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chin, Councilmember Koo, Councilmember Kolkowitz, Councilmember Lander, Councilmember Brannon, and Councilmember Yeager. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak today. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright. I proudly represent District 76, which is comprised of the Upper East Side, Yorkville, and Roosevelt Island. I'm here today to speak in favor of the bill introduced by Councilmember Antonio Reynoso regarding temporary spaces for outdoor dining. There are many small businesses, from restaurants to bars, in my district that can benefit from this bill. Many of these restaurant owners have reached out to my office and are optimistic to hear about this proposed legislation. This bill will expedite the process of obtaining a temporary permit for outdoor seating, which is extremely necessary during these hard economic times as a result of the pandemic.
Hi, it's Colin Yeager. How are you?
Small businesses across the city are suffering tremendously. More importantly, the bill would expedite the normal process of an 8-month waiting period of obtaining a temporary outdoor dining permit to about 1 month. Also, this bill will bring back and maintain previous levels of business. Furthermore, the bill will enable more social distancing as restaurants and bars begin to reopen. I want to take a moment to commend the Consumer Affairs Committee, Councilmember Antonio Reynoso, and Speaker Corey Johnson for discussing this bill today that will help countless New Yorkers. This legislation will assist small businesses in getting back up onto their feet, and it will pave the way for our new normal as New Yorkers. Once again, thank you for allowing me to speak in support of this bill. I hope to see this bill pass and have a positive impact on all small business owners across the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madison. I see that Councilmember Kozlowitz has her hand raised. Councilmember Kozlowitz?
Hi, I just wanted to say that my community board in Queens is working on this as we speak, and they've been working on it. I think this is a very good bill, and I'd like to add my name to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up is Christine Berthet, followed by Robert Bookman, and then Andrew Ridgey. Christine?
Yes. Time starts now.
I'm Christine Berthet. I represent Manhattan CV4, which is Hell's Kitchen and Chelsea, one of the districts with the most restaurants in New York City. The survival of this industry is critical to our community and providing significant employment and joy to our city. We urge the city temporarily to allow restaurants and retailers impacted by store capacity limits to utilize the roadway space for their operation and reserve parking space for vendors. But this program must also be structured in a way that reserves an appropriate, which is 12 feet, amount of sidewalk space without any obstruction for proper distancing of pedestrians. The last thing we want is another wave of contagion and a return to strict confinement. So, for example, the provision of the bill related to Sidewalk Cafe will put pedestrians and patrons at risk. The current rules often end up in real life providing less than 5 feet for pedestrians, which means pedestrians would be right on the top of patrons. We urge you to change the Sidewalk Cafe rule to require 12-foot minimum between obstruction for social distancing with each other and with patrons. Another concern we have recently is that the open container law, which has allowed restaurant and bar to sell drinks to go. In our observation, that system is not very good. And we hope that the new proposal will replace it. For example, on sidewalks on 9th Avenue, they are impassable. Instead of taking their drinks home, people of group congregate in front of bars to drink on sidewalks. Many of them do not wear masks, and residents have reported littering. So this needs to be put under control, and this new legislation or new approach would be able to replace that law in order to get there. And clearly, we do not want NYPD to show up with baton to enforce. So we also recommend that all garbage be put in parking lane, and we are very strongly in favor of this law. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Unless there are any questions from members, we will move on to the next panelist. Next panelist is Robert Bookman, followed by Andrew Ridgey, and then Kathleen Riley. Robert?
Time starts now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Robert Bookman. I'm counsel to the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I want to thank you for this legislation. We obviously support the intent of both the administration and the council to help restaurants by providing a process for quick, simple cafes that are regulated and safe for outdoor dining. We either do this or there will continue to be an unregulated Wild West out there. People need to go outdoors and restaurants need to have a place for them to sit. In my role as counsel to the Hospitality Alliance, I've been in contact with the SLA in the last 24 hours. They've already issued draft rules last night, and this needs to be coordinated with them as well, as they have their own requirements and issues. They seem to now require a permit, for a particular restaurant at a particular location, and the municipality to approve that. Shared seating may not work under the liquor laws. They're being very cooperative and helpful, and we need to work with them. This legislation is good law. It's good legislation, and it would be good law. It has two categories: contiguous sidewalk space and non-contiguous sidewalk space in the street or plazas. The contiguous space should be simple. It should be an immediate permit as of right in the space safely for this season, especially if located on a street that is currently zoned for sidewalk cafes or in a commercial zone. And the current law does not say 5 feet. It's 8 feet minimum clear path, or half the sidewalk width, whichever is greater. This new law, the proposal by the administration is a bit of a chicken or the egg. We need to do what is fastest. This legislation provides a fast process to identify locations that are non-contiguous. As to licensed food vendors, they can operate today if they like. They're food people. Nothing stopping them. When people come back on the street, they will have customers again. This legislation does not take away a single current legal space for food vendors to vend. But we have to be careful that if we open up a lane in the sidewalk, that there aren't a row of food vendors between the restaurant, and the lane that we've opened up, because they won't be able to use this. Thank you. As for community boards, as the borough president said, they already are involved with the process, but we cannot have, in an emergency situation, each particular application go back to the community boards. Community boards want this, and we need to work in a quick manner. This legislation does not require this legislation does require DOT to consult with community boards, bids, and others in identifying locations other than the contiguous sidewalk spaces. So I think, we need to move forward with this legislation. We need to coordinate with the Liquor Authority. This legislation, in fact, I believe will comply with what the Liquor Authority wants. I'm not so sure that being more nimble than that what the administration does. We need to work it out. And I thank both the administration and Corey Johnson and Member Reynoso, for pushing this along. We really need it. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you, Robert. Unless there are any questions from council members, we'll be moving on to the next panelist. The next panelist is Andrew Ridgey, followed by Kathleen Riley, and then Jennifer Tosick. Andrew?
Time starts now.
Hello, it just unmuted me. Good afternoon. First, I wanted to say thank you to Chair Cohen, Councilmember Reynoso, of course, the Speaker, and all the other members, Councilmember Powers and the others who have been very big advocates, as well as the Manhattan Borough President. And we're thrilled to see the Department of Transportation, Small Business Services as part of this conversation. Restaurants and bars are the backbone of New York City, and we need to get these businesses open as soon and as safe as possible and get people back to work. It's going to be critically important for the recovery of our city. We know we're going to be operating under reduced occupancy indoors, so we're going to need this space outdoors. And we understand that this is a big city, neighborhoods are different, but I do think if we are going to get back to a place where there is a new sense of normal, opening up restaurants and getting people back to work is going to be part of that. And we need to have this legislation, or however this is implemented, done in a way that we can adjust it as needed. We can't have business owners waiting a long time to try to get a permit, to try to get set up, because then, poof, the summer's gonna be gone. And there's incredible support. Bids, community boards. I'm on my community board on the Upper West Side, and I know all throughout the boroughs, they've been very supportive. And I think we need to work with all of them. Everyone needs to be able to provide feedback, but they need to also be able to provide feedback on an ongoing basis. And we're happy, as I said, that the Department of Transportation and the administration is having these conversations, and we look forward to working with them in the council, particularly on this legislation, 1957. I'd say a couple of quick things in my time left. One is we need business owners to be able to submit their own proposed layouts. They need to be acceptable. We understand that architectural renderings can be expensive, and we can't have an architect, as the legislation rightfully doesn't require, certify every draft.
Expired.
The second is that the permits also need to be issued within a timely fashion. So if, for example, after 5 days, a agency has been unable to review the permit, we need to allow them to start setting up subject to review. Because time, as we said, is of the essence. There's obviously a lot more. I've submitted some testimony. We can all, of course, have additional conversations, but I want to thank you very much, everyone involved in working to make this happen and making it happen soon. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. I see Chair Cohen would like to ask some questions. Chair?
Thank you very much. Andrew, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. I know how important this has been. Though, I guess I am concerned about tension. If you're on a community board, community boards, are really trying to safeguard the city streets and want to make sure that there's a good relationship between the community and the businesses. How do you envision sort of dispute resolution, or when there's someone wants to let people drink in front of their establishment until too late? Like, that's going to cause a problem that it would be great if we could kind of come up with a regime to deal with that in advance.
Yes, well, the first thing I'd say, it's extremely heartening. The community boards, and I've spoken with many of them, have been extremely thoughtful and extremely supportive, and they've had these types of discussions. I've just been so impressed by the types of conversations that have been happening. I think generally, look, this is an unprecedented crisis. We've never been in a situation like this before. And I think everyone, no matter if you're a resident or a restaurant or a visitor, is going to change their lifestyle and have to kind of compromise for the future of our city. With that said, I think that the conversations that have been happening with the council and with the administration as well want to address these issues. And I think we're going to have personal responsibility because again, this is a massive issue with not a whole infrastructure that's been in place, and we need to roll it out quickly. So I do think there's going to have to be communication. If there's an issue with a venue, a restaurant or a bar, then the community board should be working out, reaching out to them, and there should be a thoughtful conversation and mediation happening. I know that there's been conversations through the city's Office of Nightlife pre-COVID. When there's a conflict, they try to get together and mediate the situation. So I think we're all going to have to talk things through. I think we need to have a sensible framework in place, which it sounds like we have included in this legislation. And then we'll have to figure things out a bit as we go in a thoughtful, sensible way. But the idea of not doing anything, in my opinion, is so much worse than us, I'm sorry, we need to do something. If we don't act at all, the situation will be much worse. And whatever minor incidents come up, we'll have to deal with them.
Okay, I mean, again, I really, it sounds like the administration is very open to establishing a framework, but there just has to be standards. There has to be rules that I think that people can live with, and that it works for the community as well as the restaurants. So
I would just, one thing I mean, there are, while this is a new format, we do have sidewalk cafes. So there is kind of a regulatory structure. Obviously, we do not want this to become an enforcement issue, over a heavy-handed enforcement issue, but there is an infrastructure in place if people are in violation of various regulations. So it's not like
I know, but currently, like, I could call up a sidewalk cafe permit application at the council, and that could, I have some real ability to make sure that there's compliance. That's really, I guess, all I'm worried about, is I want to make sure there's an ability to have, that there's, I want to help.
Yeah, and I think looking at each neighborhood is going to be a little bit different. So there may be areas where you want to have, we're okay with, reasonable operational hours. So, in some places it may be fine. There may not be residents right there on the block. In others, it may be a heavy residential area. So again, I think we are going to have to be nimble enough to look at the different neighborhoods, take the community feedback, and do this in a thoughtful way, and be willing, to adjust as needed. But again, I think everyone would agree that it's okay to have reasonable standards in place. And if we find something works, maybe we could start implementing in other neighborhoods. And if we find something doesn't work, we can use that. But like I said, we need action, and inaction, to me, I believe, will just compound our city's crisis.
I appreciate the partnership, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you so much.